There are moments when the body becomes a stranger, and the soul learns what it means to survive on nothing but the memory of warmth. The rain tastes like rust and forgotten promises. Mara's lips are cracked, her fingers blue beneath the threadbare sleeves she's wrapped around her wrists. She is 17, though her eyes carry the weight of someone who has lived centuries in suffering. The streets of Prague, those ancient cobbled streets that whisper secrets to those who listen, have become her cathedral of abandonment. 3 years ago, her mother sold her to the silk merchant on Nerudova Street. 2 years ago, the merchant's wife discovered Mara sleeping in the linen closet and had her thrown into the streets with nothing but the dress on her back. Since then, the city has been both her killer and her keeper. She has learned to survive by becoming invisible, a shadow among shadows, a ghost in the feast of the living. Tonight, as snow begins to fall like ash from a crematorium, Mara collapses against the stone wall of an abandoned cathedral. Her stomach no longer protests the emptiness. It has surrendered to silence. She is dying slowly, deliberately, as if the universe has decided her death should be prolonged, methodical. She thinks of her mother's face, angular, cold, turning away when the merchant's wife dragged her screaming into the night. She wonders if her mother ever thinks of her at all, or if Mara has already been erased from memory, a mistake to be forgotten. A shadow falls across her face, not the shadow of the moon or the buildings, but something older, something that seems to absorb light rather than cast it. She opens her eyes, barely, for even that requires strength she no longer possesses, and sees him. He is impossibly tall, dressed in clothes that belong to another century. A long coat of black velvet, a white shirt with lace cuffs yellowed with age. His face is a sculpture of refined cruelty and infinite sadness, sharp cheekbones, dark eyes that have witnessed empires crumble, a mouth that has forgotten how to smile. He cannot be human. No human carries that weight of centuries in their gaze. He kneels beside her, and the cold that radiates from him is deeper than winter, more penetrating than death. His hand touches her cheek, and it burns with a cold so intense it becomes fire. Why do you cling to life when it has abandoned you? His voice is velvet and gravel, a whisper that somehow echoes through the narrow street. Mara tries to speak, but only a sound like wind through dead leaves emerges. She is hallucinating. This is the fever dream of a starving girl, the final mercy of her breaking mind. Because, he continues, tilting her chin upward to study her with an intensity that makes her feel seen for the first time in years. You are not meant to die in the gutter like an animal. You are meant for something far more terrible and beautiful. He lifts her effortlessly, and she weighs nothing, less than nothing, a collection of bones and despair. They move through the streets in a way that defies the laws of walking. The city blurs, and Prague's Gothic towers spiral around them like the walls of a dream. Her consciousness flickers between terror and relief, between the certainty that this is death and the desperate hope that it might be something else. When they arrive at the castle, it rises from the earth like a scar reopening. It is ancient, older than Prague itself, older than the memory of Prague. Stone and ivy, windows like hollow eyes, towers that pierce the night sky like accusations. Mara is carried through doors that groan as if in pain, down corridors lit by candles that burn without smoke, into a chamber where a fire crackles in a hearth large enough to stand in. He places her on a bed of crimson velvet, and she realizes she is no longer cold. More than that, she realizes she is still dying, but slower now, suspended in the space between expiration and eternity. Sleep, he commands, and his voice carries the weight of compulsion. When you wake, your hunger will be transformed into something you cannot yet comprehend, and you will have a choice to make, a choice that will determine whether you become my salvation or my damnation. As darkness takes her, Mara's last thought is not of her mother, but of the possibility that she was never meant to starve in the streets at all. She was meant to be found by this creature, this beautiful nightmare, this ancient thing that looks at her as if she might be the answer to a prayer he stopped believing in centuries ago. Outside, the snow falls heavier, burying the streets of Prague beneath layers of white silence, erasing the tracks that might have led anyone to this place. Chapter 2. The Blood That Binds. When consciousness returns, it arrives like a blade, sharp, sudden, transformative. Mara's eyes open to darkness so complete it becomes a presence of its own. But she can see. That is the first impossible thing. She can see every dust particle suspended in the air, every grain of stone in the walls, the individual threads in the crimson fabric beneath her. Her vision has become predatory, acute, as if the world has been rendered in a language her human eyes were never meant to read. The second impossible thing is that she no longer feels hunger. Instead, she feels something else, a pull, a need, a thirst that originates not in her stomach, but in the space behind her ribs where her heart beats slower than it should. Each beat takes an eternity. Each beat is a reminder that whatever she was, she no longer is. She sits up, and her body obeys with an elegance she never possessed when she was starving in the streets. Strength flows through her limbs like electricity, like liquid silver. She touches her face and finds it different, her skin luminescent in the dark, her cheekbones more angular, her mouth fuller. She is beautiful now, or perhaps she always was, and starvation had simply made it invisible. The vampire enters without knocking. He moves like mist, like a thought given form, and carries a crystal glass filled with something dark that smells like copper and roses and ancient rain. "Drink," he says, and it is not a request. Mara's hands tremble as she takes the glass. She knows what it is. Some part of her has always known. She brings it to her lips, and the moment the liquid touches her tongue, everything changes. It is better than food, better than warmth, better than love. It is completion. It is purpose. It is the first moment in her life where she feels as if she has finally understood what she was created for. She drinks until the glass is empty, and when she lowers it, her eyes meet his. And she sees tears, actual impossible tears, running down his ancient face. "What is your name?" she asks, and her voice is different now, deeper, resonant with harmonics that shouldn't exist. "I have had many names across centuries," he says, sitting on the edge of the bed with the weariness of someone who has carried the world for too long. "But in this life, in this castle, I am called Kazrian. And you, broken girl from the Prague streets, what shall I call you?" "Mara," she whispers. "My mother called me Mara when she loved me, before she learned that love was a luxury she could not afford." Kazrian reaches out and touches a strand of her dark hair. His fingers are cold, but she no longer feels cold as an absence. It is simply the temperature of her new existence. "Your mother was a fool and a coward. I have watched 10,000 mothers fail 10,000 daughters, and each failure wounds me anew. But you were not meant to be a mother's daughter. You were meant to be something far more dangerous." "Why?" Mara asks, though part of her already knows the answer. She can feel it in the way her blood calls to his, in the way the castle itself seems to breathe with recognition. "Why me? Why save me?" "Because," Kazrian says, and there is something breaking in his voice. "I have lived for 673 years, and I have spent the last 3 centuries searching for a reason to live that was not born of hunger or habit. I have built this castle as a tomb, expecting my own bones to be its only monument. And then I saw you dying in the snow, and for the first time since the plague took everyone I ever loved, I felt something like hope." He stands and moves toward the window. Beyond it, Prague glitters under starlight, a city of spires and secrets, beautiful and indifferent to the transformations happening within these ancient walls. There are rules now, he continues, his back to her. Rules that will define the shape of your immortality. First, you will never feed on the innocent. The hunger will scream for it, will convince you that it is the only way to survive, but it is a lie. I have killed enough innocents across centuries to understand that some hungers are better left unfed. Second, you will learn the history of what you have become. There are others like us, hidden in the cities of Europe, some old as I am, some young as you. Some are merciful, others are monsters. You must learn to distinguish between them. Third, you will decide within 1 year and 1 night whether you wish to remain here or venture into the world as my equal, my companion, or my enemy. And if I choose to leave, Mara asks, then I will release you without hesitation, and I will bear the consequence of my loneliness with the same patience I have always possessed. But know this, to love an immortal is to love something that cannot die of heartbreak, only of boredom or the slow erosion of purpose. I offer you eternity, Mara. I offer you the chance to become legendary. But the price is that you will watch this world change across centuries, and you will carry the weight of that knowledge in ways a mortal mind cannot comprehend. Mara stands and moves toward him. She is drawn by something she cannot name, not hunger, not compulsion, but something deeper. She stands beside him at the window, and together they look out at the sleeping city. I choose to stay, she says quietly. Not because I fear death, but because you chose to find me when the world left me to die. Mercy, when it arrives, is its own form of eternity. Khazrian's hand finds hers, and their fingers intertwine. Neither of them feels warmth in that touch, but they feel something else, the recognition that two broken things held together long enough might become whole. In the corner of the chamber, a mirror reflects their images with perfect clarity. Khazrian in his centuries of elegant sorrow, Mara in her sudden and terrible beauty. But when they look away from the mirror, they see only shadows. The mirror becomes a symbol of their duality. They are both present and absent, both alive and dead, both real and impossible. The castle settles around them like a sigh of relief, as if it too has been waiting for this moment of connection, this fragile beginning of something that is neither love nor possession, but a shared choice to face eternity together. Chapter 3. The Garden of Thorns weeks pass in the castle, and Mara discovers that immortality is not the glamorous transcendence the stories promised. It is routine and ritual, hunger and restraint, knowledge, and the profound ache of remembering that she will never age, never feel the weight of time in the human way. Khazrian teaches her to hunt, not for sport, but with purpose. They move through the night streets of Prague together, and he shows her how to distinguish the scent of a criminal, a murderer, a thief, a man who has sold children into bondage, from the innocent. The hunger is a fire in her veins, a screaming thing that demands satisfaction, but Khazrian teaches her to transform it into something disciplined, something that can be wielded like a weapon against the truly wicked. She learns that she is stronger than any human, faster than shadow, capable of scaling walls and moving through locked rooms as easily as through open air. She learns that her reflection in mirrors is unreliable. Sometimes she appears fully, sometimes only partially, as if the mirror cannot decide whether she truly exists. This becomes a source of profound anxiety for her, this reminder that her reality is negotiable. But there is a place in the castle that brings her peace. Khazrian takes her there on the 47th night of her immortal existence. They descend through corridors lit by phosphorescent moss, life sustained without sunlight, beauty born from darkness, and arrive at an underground garden. It is impossible. Underground gardens should not exist, should not contain living things. But this one is vast, stretching farther than the physical dimensions of the castle should allow, filled with plants that bloom in eternal twilight. There are roses, ancient and thorned, their petals the color of dried blood. There are flowers with names in languages that no longer exist, tended by an old woman whose eyes are clouded with cataracts, yet somehow see everything. She is older than Prague, older than the castle. When she sees Kazrian, she bows with the respect one shows to something both feared and beloved. "The new one," the old woman says, studying Mara with an intensity that makes her feel stripped bare. "You are hungry in ways that go beyond blood, yes. You hunger for meaning, for redemption, for proof that you are more than what they made you." Mara says nothing, but the old woman laughs, a sound like wind through a crypt. "This one knows herself," the woman says approvingly. "The last one you brought here thought immortality was a gift. This one understands it is a burden that must be chosen every night, over and over, until the choosing becomes easier or the weight becomes too heavy to bear." "Katarina," Kazrian says gently, "will you teach her?" The old woman nods and gestures for Mara to follow. She leads her through the garden, running her fingers along stems and leaves, speaking in a voice that is equal parts lullaby and incantation. "These flowers," she explains, "are grown from the tears of every immortal who has ever questioned whether their existence had meaning. That one," she points to a flower with petals like blackened silver, "was watered with the tears of a vampire in Naples who murdered 300 innocents and then spent 200 years seeking penance. That one, a rose so dark it seems to absorb light, came from the despair of a creature who loved a mortal woman so completely that he chose to let her grow old and die rather than condemn her to immortality. He wept for 70 years after she passed." Mara kneels before the flowers, feeling something crack open within her chest. "Are these real?" she whispers. "As real as sorrow, as real as love, as real as the choice that binds you to Kazrian," Katarina says. "And they will grow from you too, if you let them. Every time you deny the hunger, every time you choose mercy over vengeance, every time you decide that immortality means something beyond mere survival, a flower blooms. Your suffering will not be wasted, child. It will become beauty that other immortals will tend, will learn from, will use to remember why they chose not to become monsters." That night, Mara stands in the garden alone and allows herself to weep. The tears fall on the soil, and she swears she can feel the earth receiving them, transmuting them into something that will grow. She thinks of the woman Kazrian loved and let go, of the murderer who sought redemption through centuries of penance, of all the broken immortals who have walked these gardens seeking proof that their existence meant something. She makes a vow then, kneeling in the darkness. She will not become a monster. She will not use her strength as a weapon of cruelty. She will become a guardian instead, a protector, a living testimony to the possibility of redemption, even for those who have become something less than human. The mirror that hangs in this garden shows her reflection perfectly, completely, and she barely recognizes herself. Her face is luminous with purpose, her eyes burning with something that is not hunger, but conviction. She looks beautiful and terrible, and utterly committed to the weight of the eternity stretching before her. When she returns to find Kazrian waiting in the castle's great chamber, he studies her face and nods slowly. "You understand now," he says. "What I am offering is not eternal youth or eternal pleasure. It is eternal responsibility. It is the chance to become something that chooses, every moment, not to be damned." Mara moves to him and takes his face in her hands. His skin is cool as marble. His eyes are the green of moss that has never known sunlight. And she realizes she loves him, not as a savior, but as a mirror. He too has chosen every moment not to surrender to darkness. "I understand," she says, "and I choose to stay. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these immortal confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. Chapter 4. The Test of Hunger. 2 months into her transformation, Mara's carefully constructed discipline shatters. It happens on a night when Khazrian is absent. He hunts alone sometimes, he explains, to maintain the parts of himself that remain wild, that resist the softening influence of companionship. Mara wanders the castle, restless in ways that have nothing to do with hunger and everything to do with the terrifying realization that she loves him, and that love is a vulnerability she cannot afford. A sound draws her to one of the eastern towers, a heartbeat, rapid and frantic, belonging to something human. She descends the stone stairs before she fully understands what she is doing, drawn by a hunger so intense it obliterates everything. The lessons, the vows, the flowers in the underground garden, all of it dissolved into a pure animal need. In the tower's lowest chamber, she finds a man. He is young, perhaps 20, with the soft hands of someone who has never worked, clothes that suggest wealth and privilege. He is terrified, and his terror makes his blood sing in her veins, makes her mouth water with anticipation of violence and satiation. "Please," he begs. "I don't know how I came here. I was in Prague in a tavern, and then—" Mara recognizes him then. Not his face, but the energy that surrounds him. He is the merchant's son, the man who participated in the plot to sell her to the brothel, who laughed when her mother handed her over, who watched her being dragged away with the indifference of the privileged toward the suffering of the poor. The hunger becomes a force of nature. She moves toward him, and she can smell his blood, can taste the salt of his fear on the air, can already imagine the moment her fangs pierce his throat and his life pours into her like wine. But she stops. It is not her will that stops her. Her will is screaming for this, demanding it, promising her that it is deserved, righteous, a small measure of justice against a man who has hurt so many. It is something else that stops her. It is the memory of Katerina's voice, speaking of tears transmuted into flowers. It is the image of that dark rose, born from the despair of a creature who chose mercy instead of hunger. It is Khazrian's face, marked with centuries of regret, teaching her that some hungers are better left unfed. It is, finally, her own choice, the first real choice she has made as an immortal. Not the choice Khazrian made for her by transforming her, but the choice she makes for herself, in darkness, when no one is watching. She releases him. She lets him stumble backward, lets him run toward the stairs, lets him escape into the night believing he has been rescued by divine intervention. The hunger that follows is exquisite, terrible torture. It is as if every nerve ending in her body is screaming, as if her blood is turning to fire within her veins. She collapses to the stone floor and weeps, not gentle tears this time, but raw, ugly sobs that shake her entire form. Khazrian finds her there hours later, curled in the corner of the tower like something broken. He says nothing. He simply sits beside her and allows her to grieve the hunger she has denied, the vengeance she has refused, the person she might have become if she had given in. When she finally speaks, her voice is a whisper of absolute exhaustion. "I almost became a monster tonight." "Yes," Khazrian agrees. "I could have killed him, and no one would ever know. No one would ever care." The hunger was so loud I couldn't hear anything else. "Yes," Khazrian says again. "Why didn't you stop me?" Mara demands, anger cutting through her sorrow. "You knew he was here. You could have prevented this." "Because," Khazrian says with infinite sadness, "you would not have believed me if I told you that you could resist. You had to discover your own strength. Had to test the limits of your will against the absolute demands of your nature. And you chose, against everything in your being that screams for satisfaction, against the man who betrayed you, against 3 centuries of hunger speaking through your veins, you chose restraint." He pulls her close, and she buries her face against his chest. She cannot feel his heartbeat, but she can feel the steady cold of him, the absolute commitment to his own burden of immortality. "I will make a mirror for you," he says quietly. "Not for your reflection, but for your resolve. When the hunger becomes too loud, you will stand before it and remember this night. You will remember that you refused to become the thing that hunts you. And that refusal, that will be the flower that grows from your tears." The next morning, a mirror is installed in her chamber. It is ancient and gilded, its surface slightly warped so that reflections are distorted, imperfect. But when Mara looks into it, she sees clearly, a creature caught between damnation and redemption, beautiful and terrible, terrible and committed to choosing, every moment, not to surrender to the hunger. She touches the mirror's surface, and it is warm, the only warm thing in the castle. She understands then that this warmth is the heat of her own conviction, her own daily choice to remain something other than a monster. Chapter 5. The Night of Confessions. Months dissolve into the rhythm of the castle. Mara learns to hunt only the wicked, and slowly, so slowly that she doesn't notice until it's already happened, her targets become deliberate. She doesn't simply find criminals, she seeks them. She studies Prague's underworld and becomes a phantom justice, a legend whispered about in the dark corners where predators gather. The police find the bodies, mutilated beyond human capacity, and they speculate about the nature of the monster that stalks their city. None of them suspect it is a girl who was starving in the streets not so long ago. Kazrian watches her transformation with an expression that shifts between pride and profound sorrow. One night, as they stand together in the castle's highest tower, watching the city lights blur into infinity, he tells her something he has never told anyone. "I was not always immortal by choice," he says. The wind carries his words away, but Mara's preternatural hearing catches every syllable. "I was cursed, not blessed. There was a woman I loved, a woman named Eliana, and she loved someone else. A priest, a good man. A man she chose to marry. In the years before, I understood that love is not a force that respects choice or destiny." He pauses, and Mara can see him traveling backward through centuries, through ages of memory and regret. "I made a deal with something ancient and dark. I offered my soul for the power to make her love me. The creature that answered did not give me love. It gave me immortality and the hunger, and told me it would watch to see if I would use my new existence to claim her or to finally let her go." "Did you?" Mara asks softly. "Did you claim her?" "I watched her grow old," Kazrian says. "I watched her love her priest with a depth and authenticity that I could never have manufactured through dark magic. I watched her have children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. I watched her die, and only then did I understand that true love is not possession. It is the willingness to let the beloved become who they are meant to be, even if that means you are not part of their story." "So you have been alone," Mara says, understanding blooming in her chest. "For 600 years you have carried that knowledge, that loss, that mistake." "Not alone," Kazrian says, turning to her. "Never alone. Because the castle became a beacon for broken things, immortals who had lost themselves, humans who had suffered so much they were ready to transform into something other. I built this place as a tomb, but it became a sanctuary. And then you arrived, dying in the snow, and I recognized myself in your desperation. I recognized the moment of choice, the opportunity to either let you perish or give you the burden of immortality." "Do you regret transforming me?" Mara asks. For a long moment, Kazrian doesn't answer. Then, "Every single night I am grateful, not because you have saved me, I am beyond saving, but because you have reminded me that redemption is not about being saved. It is about choosing, again and again, not to become the worst version of yourself." That night, they make love for the first time, and it is not a gentle thing, but something fierce and desperate. Two creatures who have chosen to love despite the absolute knowledge that love, for immortals, is its own form of dying. Their bodies are cool and unchanging, but in that moment, they generate heat through sheer force of will, through the intensity of their commitment to each other. It is not pleasant, it is transcendent. It is the physical manifestation of two beings choosing connection despite, or perhaps because of, the absolute isolation that immortality demands. Afterward they lie entwined, and Khazrian tells her the names of all the immortals he has known who chose damnation, all the beautiful creatures who surrendered to the hunger and became monsters beyond redemption. He tells her about wars he has witnessed, empires he has seen crumble to dust, the slow-motion apocalypse of human suffering that repeats itself across centuries. But I have also seen beauty, he adds. Small beauties, secret beauties, a child discovering rain for the first time, a woman forgiving the man who betrayed her, a dying old man finally understanding that his life mattered, that his struggles were not meaningless. These moments are rare, Mara. They are precious precisely because they are so fragile, so easily destroyed. Is that why you build gardens? Mara asks. Why you tend flowers grown from tears? Because you are trying to preserve those moments, to make them eternal. Yes, Khazrian says, because some things are too beautiful to allow death to claim them completely. The flowers remember, the flowers preserve, the flowers become the testimony that suffering can be transmuted into something that grows. Mara falls asleep in his arms, and for the first time since her transformation, she dreams. She dreams of the woman Eliana, of Khazrian watching her from shadows across decades, of the choice he made to let her go. She dreams of the castle growing up around them like a living thing, its stones becoming the architecture of their shared commitment to redemption. And she dreams of the mirror in her chamber, reflecting not her face but her soul, scarred, radiant, terrible, and committed to the long work of becoming something more than the hunger that defines her. If this story has already captured you, leave a like. It helps the voices of those who chose eternity reach more hearts. Chapter 6. The Visitor at the Gate. The letter arrives sealed in black wax, addressed to Khazrian in a handwriting that looks ancient, cruel, and utterly illegible except for the single word at the top: accusation. Mara watches as Khazrian reads it, his face becoming something carved from marble, his eyes filling with a light that is not quite anger and not quite fear. He says nothing for a long time, simply holding the parchment as if it might dissolve at any moment. There is another, he finally says, an immortal from my earliest years, from before I understood the difference between hunger and cruelty. Her name is Margot, and she has decided that enough time has passed for her to demand a reckoning. What does she want? Mara asks, though she already knows. Immortals do not write accusatory letters unless they want blood, retribution, the settling of ancient debts. She wants to know if I have changed, or if I am the same monster who abandoned her to the hunger and madness that comes with immortal existence when one is unprepared, Khazrian says. She is coming here, to this castle, to decide whether I deserve to continue existing or whether my life should end permanently. Mara's blood becomes ice. Can she? Can she kill you? If she is skilled enough, determined enough, and if I allow her to— Yes, Khazrian says calmly. Immortals are not truly immortal, Mara. We are extraordinarily difficult to kill, but we can be destroyed. A stake through the heart from someone powerful enough. Exposure to certain ancient magics. Starvation, if one has the will to refuse the hunger long enough to reach true death. And there is always the final option. Standing in sunlight and choosing not to turn away. He stands and moves to the window, his silhouette outlined against the moonlit Prague sprawling below. Margot will arrive tonight, and you will witness what I should have told you long ago. That redemption is not a destination. It is a conversation, repeated endlessly, with everyone we have hurt, everyone we have failed. Margot is coming to have that conversation with me. The question is whether I can face her with enough honesty to survive it. As if summoned by his words, a figure appears at the castle gate, just as the clock tower in Prague strikes midnight. She is neither young nor old, beautiful and corrupted, dressed in clothes that suggest she has been wealthy and desperate in equal measure. When Kasrian opens the gate, she sweeps into the castle like a force of nature, her eyes fixed on him with an intensity that makes the air itself feel charged. "Kasrian," she says, and her voice is poisoned honey, sweet and deadly. "How you have decorated this tomb. But tombs, ultimately, are for corpses. I wonder which one of us will be taking permanent residence here tonight." Kasrian offers no greeting, no defense. He simply gestures toward the great chamber, and Margot moves through the castle as if she owns it, Mara following behind like a guard, like a witness, like a creature caught between two forces that are about to collide. In the chamber lit by 1,000 candles, Margot finally turns to face them both. Her eyes land on Mara with something like pity. "A new creation," she observes. "How many have there been, Kasrian? How many have you made in your desperate attempt to resurrect the life you should have let die centuries ago?" "Margot," Kasrian says, and his voice is infinitely weary, "I deserve your accusations. I deserve your rage. I cannot undo what I did to you, cannot erase the centuries you spent broken, because I was selfish and arrogant enough to believe I could remake immortality into something merciful." "You can try," Margot says, and she pulls a knife from beneath her coat, a knife that gleams with an ancient darkness, a knife that seems to absorb the light of every candle around them. "You can try by letting me do what should have been done centuries ago. You can try by choosing death as a final mercy." Mara steps forward, her body moving to place itself between Kasrian and Margot's knife. "No," she says simply. Margot laughs, a sound like breaking glass. "The child defends the monster. How touching. But you do not understand what he took from me, what he created in me. I am not whole, girl. I am an eternal wound, and no redemption story, no castle of tears, no dead flowers will ever change that." "You are right," Mara says quietly. "I cannot change what he did to you. I cannot unmake your suffering. But I can tell you that he has spent 600 years trying to become better than he was. And that effort, that commitment, matters. Not because it erases what happened, but because it proves that change is possible, that even the ancient and corrupted can choose differently." Something shifts in Margot's expression. The knife wavers, and in that moment of hesitation, Kasrian speaks. "I made you immortal without your consent," he says. "I transformed you in a moment of self-serving desire, believing I was saving you when I was actually condemning you. I left you alone with the hunger and the weight of centuries and no guidance on how to survive them. These are not accidents. These are deliberate cruelties born from my own arrogance. And I have spent 600 years trying to understand how I could do such things, how I could be capable of such fundamental harm." He extends his hand, not as an act of supplication, but of offering. "You may kill me. That right has always been yours. But I ask you first to listen to what I have learned, not as a defense, but as testimony. I ask you to determine whether my continued existence can serve as a warning to others who might become what I was, or whether the world is better served by my permanent death." Margot stares at him for what feels like eternity. Then, slowly, she lowers the knife. "I came here wanting to die," she finally says. "I wanted you to be the same monster so that my decision to end us both would be justified. But if you have truly changed, if this castle of yours is really what it claims to be." She looks around at the shadows and candlelight, at the ancient stones that seem to hold within them centuries of sorrow and strange redemption. "Then perhaps there is another option." "What option?" Kasrian asks carefully. "Tell me everything," Margot says. "Tell me every mistake you have made, every immortal you have hurt, every moment you have spent knowing you could not undo the damage you had caused. Tell me, and if I believe that you are not simply performing redemption but actually living it, then perhaps, I will choose to survive. I will choose to become part of your work here. And together, we can determine whether merciful immortality is truly possible, or whether we are all simply elaborate fictions waiting for someone to expose the truth. That night, Khazrian does something he has not done in centuries. He tells the complete truth about himself. He speaks of the centuries of hunger and cruelty, of the women he seduced and the men he destroyed, of the lives he ruined with the careless arrogance of immortal power. He speaks until dawn approaches, and his voice becomes something like a prayer, like a confession, like the first time in 600 years that he has been truly honest about the monster he has been. And Margot listens. By the time the sun touches the eastern sky, she has made her choice. She will stay. She will work with him to tend the gardens, to help the broken creatures that arrive at the castle gates, to build something that might, just might, prove that immortality need not be a curse if one is committed enough to transformation. As Mara watches Margot and Khazrian descend together into the underground gardens, she understands something profound. Redemption is not a moment. It is a process, repeated again and again, with every person we have wronged, every creature we have hurt. It is a conversation that never quite ends, a reckoning that defines us not through our past, but through our commitment to becoming something different. She places her hand on the warmed mirror in her chamber, and she feels the heat of her own resolve, the temperature of her choice to continue choosing redemption, night after night, forever. Chapter 7. The Prophecy in Silence. Weeks pass, and the castle transforms. Margot brings with her not just bitter history, but also knowledge, ancient knowledge of the immortals who have walked Europe across centuries, of the networks and societies that govern their hidden world. She teaches Mara about the council in Vienna, about the isolates who live alone in mountains and caves, about the collectors who gather other immortals like a dragon hoarding gold, feeding on power rather than blood. The world will eventually know what we are, Margot tells her one evening as they tend the garden together, their fingers moving among the flowers that have grown from tears and transformation. They always do, and when that knowledge becomes widespread, there will be violence. There will be inquisitions, witch hunts, massacres. The question is not whether humans will discover us, but whether we will be ready when they do, and whether we will have built enough beauty to prove that we are worth coexisting with. Mara absorbs this knowledge with the intensity of someone who understands that immortality brings responsibility along with eternal life. She begins to understand that the castle is not just a sanctuary, it is a fortress. A place where immortals can come not to hide, but to prepare for the day when hiding becomes impossible. One night, Khazrian takes her to a chamber she has never entered before. It is sealed with symbols carved in languages older than Latin, and when Khazrian places his hand on the stone, the door opens with a sound like a groan of recognition. Inside, the walls are covered entirely in mirrors. This is the Chamber of Futures, Khazrian explains, an ancient place built by an immortal who is no longer with us. She had the gift of prophecy, the ability to see the paths that history might take. She used this chamber to try to glimpse which futures were most likely, and how we might shape them toward better outcomes. Did she succeed? Mara asks, studying the mirrors that reflect not her image, but something more, fractured versions of possible realities, timelines where events unfolded differently. No, Khazrian says sadly. Prophecy is a curse, not a gift. It drives immortals mad far more reliably than hunger does. She eventually chose to step into sunlight rather than continue bearing the weight of futures she could see but could not change. He moves to one of the mirrors, and his reflection splits into multiple versions. In one, he stands alone, ancient and corrupted. In another, he kneels before the council in Vienna, begging forgiveness. In a third, the castle is burning, and he walks into the flames with a look of terrible peace. This is what the chamber shows, Khazrian continues. Every possible future branching from this moment forward. The question is, which future we will choose to create through our daily actions, our commitments, our refusal or acceptance of certain hungers. In one particular mirror, Mara sees a vision that makes her blood freeze. Herself and Khazrian, decades in the future, standing in a city that is not Prague. Around them, humans and immortals move freely, openly, no longer hiding. There is violence and resistance, but there is also the beginning of coexistence. And in that reflected future, she sees herself standing before crowds, speaking not as a monster, but as a witness, a living testimony to the possibility of redemption. Is that future real? She asks. Is that what will happen? It is one possibility among infinite possibilities, Khazrian says. It is a future that will only exist if we make choices today that bend toward it. It requires that we survive the next 100 years without being discovered. It requires that we continue to build networks of merciful immortals. It requires that humanity begins to question whether all monsters are evil or whether some monsters are simply creatures trying, against all odds, to become better than their nature. He takes her hand, and together they stand before the mirrors, watching futures branch and split and reconverge like blood flowing through infinite veins. The prophecy I have seen most clearly, Khazrian says, is this. One of us will have to die. Not destruction, not permanent death, but stepping willingly into daylight and accepting the ending. It is the price of this world accepting us. It is what will prove we are not immortal in the way they fear, not eternal predators, but creatures capable of choosing finality, choosing sacrifice. Who? Mara asks, though she already suspects the answer. That is the one future I have never been able to see clearly, Khazrian says. The prophecy fogs and becomes uncertain at that point. We might have centuries to decide, or we might have only years. But I know that one of us will have to make that choice, and I know that it will not be a death of defeat, but a death of triumph, a death that proves we are more than the hunger. They leave the Chamber of Futures and return to the castle's familiar halls. But something has shifted in Mara. She now understands that immortality is not escape from consequence. It is the deepening of responsibility, the expansion of duty to include not just her own soul, but the fate of the species, the course of human history, the slow work of reshaping the world's understanding of what monsters are. That night, she stands before her mirror, the warmed mirror that reflects her resolve, and she speaks a quiet vow. Whenever the moment comes, I will be ready to choose. I will choose whichever death is necessary, whatever sacrifice is required. I choose to live such that when my end comes, it will matter. Chapter 8. The Choice. 10 years have passed in the castle. A decade of hunting and hiding, learning and loving, building networks with other immortals who share Khazrian's vision of merciful existence. The castle has become a center of something unprecedented, not just a refuge for broken creatures, but a school for understanding what it means to be immortal with compassion rather than cruelty. Mara is no longer the starving girl found dying in the snow. She has become something else, a bridge between human and immortal, a teacher for new immortals arriving at the castle gates, a living proof that transformation is possible. But with this role has come a slow realization. She is becoming known. Whispers move through Prague's underworld. Stories are told about the beautiful woman who appears in the night to stop murders, to save those destined for predation, to punish the truly evil with a grace that seems almost merciful despite its ferocity. Some call her an angel, others call her a demon. A few, the ones who have studied history closely, who remember old stories passed down through generations, recognize the signs of immortality. One morning, Mara receives a letter addressed to her personally. It is not sealed in black wax, but in crimson. When she opens it, she finds an invitation from the Council of Vienna. They know what she is. They are aware of the castle. They are requesting a meeting, not a demand, but a formal request from the ruling body of European immortals. Khazrian is quiet when she tells him. He sits in their chamber, with its warmed mirror reflecting their intertwined silhouettes, and he seems to be aging in a way that has nothing to do with the passage of time and everything to do with the weight of futures becoming present. It is time, he finally says. The world is about to change. The Council has decided to move toward revelation, a carefully managed disclosure of immortal existence to humanity. They believe they can control the narrative, can ensure their own survival through strategic transparency. They are asking you to decide whether to support this or to resist it. What do you believe? Mara asks. I believe, Khazrian says slowly, that the moment the world knows about us is the moment everything ends. Not immediately, but inevitably. There will be violence, persecution, government experiments, organized hunting. Some of us will die, many will. And the only way that immortals can truly survive this future is if there are enough of us who have proven ourselves to be allied with humanity rather than opposed to it. He stands and moves to the window, looking out at Prague, at the city where so much of this story began. I believe, he continues, that the prophecy is finally becoming clear. One of us must volunteer to go to Vienna. One of us must stand before the Council and before the world and testify to what we are. And that testimony must be made with the absolute knowledge that it might result in capture, torture, study, or permanent destruction. It must be made freely, without coercion, as the final proof that merciful immortality is real. Mara already knows what must happen. She has known since the moment she saw her future self in the Chamber of Futures, standing before crowds as a witness. She has been preparing for this without quite understanding why. I will go, she says quietly. No, Khazrian says. But it is not a command, it is a plea, and both of them understand that it changes nothing. Yes, Mara says, because I was given immortality as a gift, not because I sought it or deserved it. Because everything I am has been shaped by your mercy and Margot's wisdom and the flowers in the garden that grew from other immortals' tears. I have nothing to lose and everything to prove. Let me go to Vienna. Let me become the testimony. You may not survive, Khazrian says. Probably not, Mara acknowledges. But I will go into that city not as a monster, not as a creature seeking to hide what I am. I will go as a witness to redemption, and maybe, just maybe, that will be enough to prove that we are not your worst fear, but something far more complicated. She embraces him, and they stand together in their chamber for what they both understand may be the last time. His cold body is familiar now, beloved now, and she feels the full weight of their 10 years together. The love that has defined the shape of her immortality, the commitment that has given her existence meaning beyond hunger. Promise me something, Khazrian says finally. Anything. Promise me that regardless of what the Council decides, regardless of what happens to you, you will not surrender to bitterness. You will not allow their violence or cruelty to corrupt what you have learned about mercy. You will remain what you have chosen to become. I promise, Mara says, and in the warmed mirror beside them, she sees two creatures, immortal and undying, beautiful and terrible, united in the commitment to remain transformed, no matter the cost. She leaves the castle at dusk, traveling toward Vienna in human form, with human documents and human explanations for her presence. But she carries with her something invisible but essential. The testimony of 10 years spent choosing redemption, the knowledge that mercy can resurrect even the damned, the absolute commitment to showing the world that monsters, given the chance, can choose to become something more. As she boards the train that will carry her toward her reckoning, she places her hand on the window and watches Prague disappear into darkness behind her. She thinks of the garden beneath the castle, of the flowers that have grown from the tears of every broken immortal who chose to stay and fight rather than surrender to hunger. She thinks of Khazrian watching from the castle tower, sending her into the world as his final gift to humanity, proof that love can bridge the impossible distance between mortal and immortal, between cruelty and mercy, between damnation and redemption. The train carries her toward Vienna, toward revelation, toward a fate she does not know, but has chosen willingly. And somewhere in the darkness behind her, in a castle made of stone and sorrow and stubborn grace, Khazrian begins the work of waiting. He will wait for her return or for confirmation of her ending. He will wait with the patience of the immortal, carrying the knowledge that some choices are made not to ensure survival, but to ensure that one's existence has meant something in the vast, indifferent universe. The girl who once starved in the streets of Prague is gone. In her place walks a creature who has learned that immortality is not a curse, but a choice. The choice to love, to transform, to witness, to testify to the possibility that even monsters, given enough time and enough mercy, can become something worth dying for. And that is the triumph and the tragedy of her eternal life. Not that she will live forever, but that she has lived so completely, so committedly, so transformed into a creature of conviction and compassion that her death, when it comes, will have the weight of meaning, the resonance of purpose, the eternal echo of a life that mattered. Subscribe if you believe mercy can resurrect even the damned. End of series.